You're listening to The Other 50%, a history of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where we talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. In this episode, I got to speak with Taj Paxton. Taj is currently the Vice President of Documentary Films at Logo. She has been an executive with Forrest Whittaker's production company and at MTV, and she is a writer, a producer, a filmmaker. And to think, she started out on Wall Street. Reading directly from her bio, since I can't say it any better, Taj's interests lie at the intersections of art and social change. Her journey is filled with life lessons that cannot be confined to the boxes of gender, race, and sexual orientation. She hopes her work will continue to shape the conversation around the kinds of stories we tell, and that those stories become a tool for greater cultural understanding and cohesion. Isn't that delicious? This conversation was yummy. You can find us at theother50%.com to see bios, photos, my musings on the blog, the coffee cups, the t-shirts. You can find us on iTunes, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the places. And I have another podcast called The Other 50%, a history of tech. You can also find it on iTunes or on the same website. That's where I talk to successful women in tech and hear their stories. Okay, here's Taj. What is your job?
My job is identifying and curating LGBT-themed documentaries for Logo Networks, which is a part of the Viacom family of about 8 networks.
Very cool. How long have you had that job?
About 2.5 years.
What's the title of your job?
VP of Documentaries.
Very fancy.
Yeah.
How did you get into this business in the first place?
I got into the business out of a desire to experience some part of the arts. I was in business school and I realized that wasn't going to do it. And I had friends who were in the arts, and that's kind of how I gravitated toward it.
So you didn't always know I want to be in entertainment?
No. I had no desire to be in entertainment.
What were you going to do?
I was going to do I had one path. I was going to be in mergers and acquisitions at some big financial house and then manage a hedge fund by which I would leverage that into a political career and eventually become the first African-American governor of the state of California. That was the plan.
That's a pretty good plan, too,
It's a pretty good plan, yeah. I was 15 years old in the 12th grade, and that's exactly what I wanted to do.
You were 15 years old in the 12th grade?
Mm-hmm. When I started the 12th grade, I was 15 years old.
What grades did you skip?
Kindergarten and first. So I just went right from preschool. I think I started kindergarten for a second, and then I went to second grade.
They're like, no, you're reading and writing and doing math.
Totally.
Get out of here.
More like, they're like, you're chatting and bothering other people. You have to go somewhere else where children are equally as chatty.
Let's get you focused.
Totally. I think I was quite verbal from 4 to 5, and they were like, we got to get you somewhere else where they can keep up with you, because you're bothering the other kids. I'm a notorious chatter.
Okay, so then you're in business school, and at some point you thought, no, on that plan?
I stayed in business school, but what I elected to do was take a lot of English and writing classes, take classes in communications at Howard University, which was across the city in Washington, D.C. from where I was.
Where were you?
At Georgetown. So I just got on that G2 bus and went to Howard and took 2 classes in their very prestigious School of Radio and Film and Television. And it was at that point that I could start to understand it as a business, because I'm from here, and although I grew up watching television be filmed and, you go into the grocery store and you see famous faces, it's just a part of living in LA, I never thought of it as a business. Business was a product, a service, managing money, moving money. Those are the things that looked like business to me. And clearly, this is a business that drives whatever we are, the 9th, 10th biggest economy or something in the world in California.
Yeah. So do you know what it was that clicked for you? Where you were like,
I'm not sure. I think there may be several clicks. I don't know if I remember just one distinct click. I think you just start seeing the signs that this is not for me. I remember I was at JP Morgan right after college, and I kept walking into the building at 60 Wall Street. So there was this glut of people walking into 60 Wall every morning, and the guard kept asking me, who I was. And I think one of the last times he said, ma'am, like pointing to me, can you come over so I can, see your badge and see who you are? And I just thought, I've been here almost a year. Do you mean to tell me my face is in no way familiar?
Did you just think you didn't belong there?
That was my interpretation.
Yeah.
So see, you and I have a similar brain. That was my interpretation. I felt like, well, he doesn't think I belong here, and he might be right. Light bulb. Let's move along. So I packed up, came back to California because I had in my mind that creative people starve, artists starve. So I thought, if I'm going to starve, I better get back and starve at home.
Yeah, might as well be close to home.
Right. Instead of in New York with these winters and like eating Hormel chili out of a can from Dwayne Reed, which is what I was doing when I first left JP Morgan. I thought, get back to home where I can get some meals and shelter. But luckily it didn't come to that. I was able to kind of get work right away. There was so much, there was so much production happening, so I could PA on a music video, on a commercial, on a film, and eventually I began to understand the nuts and bolts of what was happening, meet enough people, and I was fortunate enough to get an assistant job at MTV. That was my first job in film and TV.
So you jumped into production kind of at the bottom and worked your way up and saw the landscape?
Oh yeah. I jumped into running, getting coffee, apple boxes, like, what is that? You know the story everybody has when you're in production. What is that? And you don't ask anybody, you just you use your intuition, you figure it out, right? Context clues. You're like, apple box. Apples would come in a box that size. Okay.
So what department were you in at MTV?
MTV at the time had a film division run by David Gale and Van Toffler, and that division was a part of Paramount. We had an output deal through Paramount, so that's the division.
So they were making films?
They made Beavis and Butthead Do America. I'm proud of that cultural contribution, and I have a credit on it, which says assistant to the producer.
Congratulations.
And yeah, Beavis and Butthead. And then they made a series of films over very rapidly in the next 3 to 4 years. They made Dead Man on Campus. I should say we made Dead Man on Campus, Election, Varsity Blues, The Wood, which was the opportunity I had to supervise a film for the first time and work with an emerging filmmaker. And that was a fantastic experience in that I learned immediately how not to be. And I learned it the hard way. So I love that I can learn that lesson early. I think I was in my 20s, so...
Oh, please tell me that story.
I didn't have to learn it again. I was kind of hovering exec, and it's not pleasant. And now that I'm a filmmaker myself, I've been on the other side and, just been in it longer, more relaxed. I realize how annoying that must have been. But I was definitely one of those. It was my first time, so I didn't know. So all I could think was...
And you have this big responsibility.
Totally. My mind was on manage risk. Don't let anything bad happen. But I think I was approaching it as you might a spreadsheet or a financial prospectus of some sort, and how you shift numbers around and move things, and a project management time frame instead of production, which is a living and breathing entity that underneath it you don't have accountants and people who are removed from their work. What you have are people who are deeply and personally invested in what they're doing. So when you're managing those kinds of people in that temperament, you cannot apply the same approach that you would to managing numbers and spreadsheets. And I think that's what I had to learn in that first film.
Even though you are getting the numbers in the spreadsheets and the cost reports.
Totally. You're getting the numbers in the cost sheet, and the cost report, but you are managing the people first. And I think that's really important to remember. Maybe not even first, because that sets up this linear understanding of how it works, just to realize that you're managing the people also. So you might be a fantastic producer at managing numbers and reports, but to me, you're not a consummate producer if you can't manage people and reports.
So how did you figure out how to make that adjustment?
I think I just realized when the filmmaker at the end of the process was not like, oh, thank you, it was a pleasure to work with you. I think I realized then, I don't think I did something right. Because I've been to enough of these film independent and IFP seminars where I see producers and directors talking about their relationships, and I do not think I'm about to have that relationship with this filmmaker. So as a result, I thought, let me take a look and see what I've done to create a scenario where at the end of this, we're not two people who have, effectively crossed burning sands together, and instead we're, two people who are saying bye-bye and thank you.
Wow, that's really self-reflective and aware, and probably helped you a great deal.
I think so.
So the next film, how did that go?
The next film was a much different experience as a result. And I think that now, my job is I talk to several filmmakers a day. We have the films that have aired on the network and the films that will air. And there's just a different experience that I have with filmmakers now. You really respect the time it takes, particularly documentary, because a lot of these filmmakers are doing that work without the promise of financial reward. We're working in narrative and scripted, people think of it more as having a financial upside than you do docs. And yet these doc filmmakers give 175% to their work and to the subjects and a lot of times the issues that their films are about. So it just makes me really respectful. I'm respectful anyway, but then when you hear their journeys, it actually humbles me because I think they have abilities and skills and patience and tenacity that the average filmmaker does not necessarily have to pull on as much. Mm-hmm. You know, when you have a person's life in your hands, a lot of times with a doc, you're documenting a human being. That's going to have ramifications depending on how you portray their story and what you put in, what you leave out. Tone is a very big deal. So when you look at some of the best ones and how they've really shaped our culture and our understanding of life, you know, we owe a lot, I think, to how doc filmmakers have shaped our collective consciousness.
Yeah, and they get in there and it's so intimate and so raw, so you can really see it.
Totally. I remember watching Blackfish, which is a film that I feel like I'm like a prophet for. I just stumped talking about Blackfish. I see the way that have you seen that?
Is that the one about the dolphins and the whales?
About the whales.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. About the large, I don't want to call them killer whales, but about I forget the name of the breed, but yeah, it's about the whales, and I see it as a metaphor for power and the way marginalized people are treated. And I think that's why I got into it so much, is because I thought this is a prime example of how people, or in this case the whales, are plucked from their natural environments, placed in these containers to service the needs of the dominant culture, in this case SeaWorld and places like it. And there's very little thought given to their natural evolution and what is required for them to flourish. The consideration is, what do we need to flourish? What does SeaWorld, the dominant culture, need to flourish? Mm-hmm. Not the whale. And I think that's why I was just blown away by it, because I thought, this film is telling us so much, not just about how we treat animals, but how we treat people. And I think that film is a great example of how films can start a movement, because...
Oh, it sure did.
It just started a movement. And I would have Blackfish viewing parties. Like, oh, you're hanging out with me Saturday night? Cool.
Let me put
this on. let me just start it. And once you start it, you cannot turn away from that film. You just can't. At least, I don't know, a lot of people I know can't, so I couldn't.
No, just you saying the thing, I'm picturing them chasing them in Puget Sound, chasing down the families of the whales.
Well, what's very interesting is that they don't take the family. They took the baby. You can look at civilizations that have been overtaken in time, and that's one of the methods of overtaking civilizations, is that you take the children and separate them from the parents and educate them and indoctrinate them into this new way of being, which then makes them alien to their families, and their families alien to them, but they're instead very connected to you, or to whatever that dominant culture is that took them, you know? So,
oh my God, you just made that movie so much deeper than I thought it was.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of an overthinker, but yeah, that's how I look at it. You know, you can see that in the Native American culture and the missionaries that came and separated the children and in many cases abused them in the course of their education. And that's back to why I think doc filmmakers are so brilliant. I think there's a lot to be seen there.
So your job at Logo, are you buying the films after they're finished, or are you
in some cases
funding them as they go?
We are licensing, acquiring, and producing. So there are some films that are 100% finished, some that need 60%, 70%, 50%, and then in very rare cases we've been able to get in on the ground and develop films from the beginning and tell that story. So one of the films that we did was called Hungry. It was about female chefs and the kind of challenge a very particular challenge that women have in professional cooking environments. There are a lot of women chefs now, and in the doc we look at how the numbers have grown over the years. And we do this all through the lens of 3 women who are having different experiences as chefs and restaurant owners. But we're looking at how the roles have increased, but are they getting the same access to capital, marketing, publicity? Those are the hard facts. And then you have these kind of soft facts, like are they getting the respect and the acclaim and the prestige? Do they have any challenges in their work environments that are based in gender that they can see? And those are some of the more soft things we examine in the film.
What are the numbers?
I knew you were going to ask me that. And I don't have that in my head. But what I do have is that...
Are they good?
Well, what they are is that I think it's something like, the stat is in the film. I'm going to pass on saying the number because I don't want to get it wrong.
Okay.
But the percentage of women restaurant owners who get small business loans is much smaller than the number of men who get the loans.
Yeah, it sounds right. Because I'm sitting here thinking of chefs as you're saying that, and I can name one female chef.
Who is it?
Susan Feniger.
Oh, she's in the film.
Is she?
Yep.
I was wondering if she was.
Perfect. Which is one of the reasons we had to have her in the film is that
she's the one we know.
She's the one we know, and she's really been out front in terms of, blazing a trail. And not only has she been there doing it, but a lot of other women who are chefs point to the time they spent with her in her kitchen or the way that she mentored them or the way that she was available for advice. And that kind of comes back to all the ways that women can be the change. I think she's a great example of that. You see it in our business. It's really about, yes, we understand what we're up against. And we are in no way in denial about that. And so as we look at it, where does our power lie? And our power lies in joining efforts with other women. And as much as your opportunities flourish, being sure that you create those opportunities for other women. And I think as you do that, it's mathematical at that point. It begins to have an impact. If every woman who has access to something, whether it be, in our case, in our business, funding or directing opportunities, every time you have it, open up a door.
Bring someone with you.
Another woman or several.
How do you think we get the same kind of engagement from men? How do we engage them in the effort to include more women and to open the door and to send the elevator back?
I think I'm more focused on how do we, as the women who are having the opportunities, support one another. And I think if we put our resources there, it will begin to multiply.
It'll be enough.
It may not be enough, but it's more empowering to me. That if whatever I have, it's like, the parable of the fishes and the loaves of bread, right? In the Bible, if I have fish and bread and I just start to parse it out and say, here to this woman, that woman, that woman, that woman, now we all have, so we multiply. I think of it that way, because if I think of how to go to the men to engage them, it just immediately feels like you're asking them to do something they are not willing to do. I'm really engaged by what's happening in the reverse. The men that are coming to women's spaces and saying, what can I do? You saw that in the Women's March with the number of men who were committed to going and taking their families with them to the Women's March, right? You see that in the opportunity that we had to meet one another, that here's this group of people, pretty much male run, and they're saying, hi, we want to come to you and talk to you about what we need to do better.
Yeah, how do we help?
How do we help? The more people can realize that women's evolution and women's advancement advances us all, then that just feels like it'll naturally shift. Now, granted, there are plenty of women who are going to the men to figure out how to get them engaged. And I say, amen. There's more than one way to kind of make this progress happen. It's just
all directions.
All directions.
All fronts.
Right. It's just, for me, it just feels more of a challenge to do that. And if you look at me, I've been given a wonderful opportunity at this network. Our network is headed by a woman. So as a result, 7 of the 10 films that we've broadcast have been directed by women. And that
you have the best numbers in the biz.
Not an accident. We look at it. We're saying, certainly we're evaluating the quality of the film first. And then we're also asking, well, does it also open up an opportunity for a filmmaker who might otherwise be underrepresented? And when the answer is yes, it makes it like a feather in the cap. You're just even happier that opportunity happens. And in docs, the numbers for female filmmakers are higher than in narrative. Don't ask me the numbers again. I know you're going to ask.
I want to ask.
So they're higher. So it makes it a little bit easier because the pool is bigger to draw from in general. But that to me is a better way to work. Because, for example, Blair Dorschwalter, who was the filmmaker who made Out in the Night, the first film that we broadcast in this division, she then went on to get a MacArthur Genius Grant. That allows her to support and sustain her career a little bit better. And she's a filmmaker who then brings on other filmmakers and collaborates. And you just see the web spreading.
Yeah. What did you do between MTV and Logo?
I feel like I have to think back on this. So, when I left MTV, I ran Forrest Whittaker's company for about 3 years. And my job there was similar, identify, curate IP, film, TV, books. And we were able to produce 2 films together, and the company produced 2 great television shows, 1 miniseries. And from there, I had a little bit of a eat, pray, love moment and had to take some time away from the business. Like, I got to that point where I realized this is not everything I thought it would be. It just wasn't as fulfilling as it needed to be. So I think it was about a perspective shift. The business can do so much for you, but at the end of the day, you have to find other things in your life too. And I didn't have anything else. It was like lean in before lean in. Mm-hmm. You know, like I leaned in too much and I realized I need more. So I got to lean out so I can try to fill my cup with some other stuff.
So what'd you do?
I traveled. I became a writer myself, or maybe I should say maybe I allowed myself to write because I think the voice was always there and trapped behind the producer. I write what I continue to write. I write cultural essays and I write screenplays. So I had the privilege of having one of them published in a book called What Makes a Man? 21 Writers Imagine the Future. And it was edited by Rebecca Walker, who really had an idea that was only now we see coming into consciousness, which was that masculinity has to evolve, the whole concept of it. And if we keep masculinity in a constraint, then we don't get anywhere. It needs a chance to like expand so that all types of men get to exist in this world. And then if all types of men get to exist, maybe we can also allow all types of women to exist.
Yes.
You know, again, not linear, but you know, it flows
all
together.
All the people can exist.
All the people can exist if we can break down what has to be in terms of being a man. So that's why the title is What Makes a Man.
I love that. I'm going to go look that up.
Please, by all means. So I enjoyed the writing, and I'm also a yoga teacher. I love yoga. I think it's part of what helps me to be reflective and considerate and compassionate and have empathy.
What type of yoga are you doing?
Just any movement. I think it works for any type, really. I think you can just jump in. Just do it. Find the version that fits you. For some people, they like restorative yoga where we lay around on pillows a lot and blankets and support.
Nap yoga.
Nap yoga. I think nap yoga is fantastic. I think vinyasa yoga where you're jumping back in chaturanga and in heated rooms of 98 degrees, fantastic. Go for that if that's your thing. But just find a way to connect, because it's the idea that it pulls you away from this referral point being objects and things outside of yourself and allows you to have a self-referral. And whatever version you do, if it does that, by all means do it. And I would meet people and they say, oh, well, I don't do yoga. I don't like it. I surf. And I'm thinking, great, surf yoga. You know, just however you can get one and be fully engaged and present. I know women who being a mother is their yoga because they're so present with it. There's no pushback. They're just in.
I remember once being at Golden Bridge with Gurmukh and having these 3 infants, and I was mostly just sweating and crying all the time. And she just said, let me let you all off the hook. If you have babies, that is your spiritual practice. You're done. That's all you have to do. And I was just like, oh, so relieved.
It's divine.
Yeah.
It's divine. You're loving and guiding. I mean, when you look back at, certainly for me, that what I've gotten in my life, the values, they come from those moments spent with my mother, my father as well. The parenting in general is just this divine, it's a divine practice. And I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I think when there's a lot of pushback because it always sounds like we're saying to women, you are not who you are meant to be until you're a mother. And that's not at all what I'm saying. No, I'm saying that if you're in it though, please know you are already on a divine journey.
Well, it brings up every little thing you need to focus on and work on in yourself. You can't not face your stuff if you have a bunch of infants running around.
Yeah, totally. And to me, it also, I was raised Christian, because I keep making these Christian references, I hear it, but the fruits of the Spirit are love, patience, kindness, joy, temperance, meekness, faith. You need every single one of those to raise a child.
Amen.
Right? So it's like it just brings it up in you automatically.
You can't help it.
So it's not a path I've taken for myself, but I bow down to it, that's for sure.
Okay, so back to you.
Okay.
You went on your Eat, Pray, Love journey, and then at some point you got back into the game?
Yeah, I don't think I ever really left it. I was like a game adjacent. It was more that I just leaned out, as I was saying. And and I got back in and was producing a couple of docs on my own, a couple of narrative films, writing my own scripted work, and met with some success with that. I wrote a freelance episode for the Tyler Perry show, House of Pain, and did a short film called A Fat Girl's Guide to Yoga. And part of winning the NBC Comedy Shortcuts Prize is that you also enter into a development deal, not for the whatever film you want, but just in general. So I chose to develop the Fat Girls Got to Yoga into a half-hour kind of thing, and that was a great experience to be in the development. Yeah, to be in the development phase, with a major network. Again, just a learning tool. You really see how much goes into the decisions of the ultimate outcome. And while that project did not go to series, I feel like I gained so much.
Yeah. So did you write a pilot for it? Did they produce a pilot?
No, we did not. We did not get there.
But you went through that whole process.
Went through the process. Yes, definitely. And I think it makes me happy to know that, you wrote something that somebody says, oh, okay, yeah, I'm interested in that idea. Here's the money. Go write it.
How many people can say that?
It's
huge.
A great feeling. Somewhere out there are the stats on how many ideas go from, like it's this many that start and networks then buy this many pitches and they only order this many to script and then to pilot and then to series. So, yeah.
To be in that pipeline is incredible.
Mm-hmm. In the pipeline.
Yeah. So how do you think, and thinking about that conversation we had at that panel a couple weeks ago, and I've been thinking about it a lot since, this whole idea of inclusion and representation, and the numbers are still so dismal, but it does feel like in the last year or two, people are starting to acknowledge that we have some work to do. Mm-hmm. How do you think we do it?
I think we do it by the women who are in the positions already. Are we talking about directing or one particular area?
I'm just thinking of...
Because that's where those dismal numbers are. I think that's where the focus is.
There's a lot of focus on the director's numbers, but I think all the numbers are terrible, and the representation is also terrible. Mm-hmm.
Asking how we do it, it makes me feel like I'm supposed to have the answer to that.
Yeah, don't you have the checklist?
Am I supposed to have the answer? Listen.
What's your piece?
I know. What's my piece?
Doing?
Yes, my piece is I show up, give everything, work with other female filmmakers as much as possible, expand opportunities for those filmmakers. I mentor through Women in Film so that we begin to cultivate filmmakers from a young age, like just postgraduate, so that they begin to blossom into this business. I have conversations about where we are and biases, conscious and unconscious. Mm-hmm. I try to hold space for that it's a safe space for us to talk about this because we can't ignore it any longer. And I think for me, I sit in a unique nucleus in the middle of three marginalized communities. So queer, Black, female. So I get to talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
In terms of where we are and how we kind of break down the ways that we are separating ourselves and deciding that only people who look and behave a certain way are allowed opportunity. That's really what we're doing. And just challenge that a little bit. Why is that? Why do you assume that the person who is female cannot handle the responsibility of directing a film or can't put a camera on her shoulder just as well as the male DP can? What's that about?
When you say it like that, it sounds absurd.
It really is absurd.
Because it's absurd.
But then you also realize how deeply held these beliefs are. So I feel like in the work that we're doing, we have to really acknowledge how deeply held these beliefs are that women are physically and mentally inferior. And just face that. And women can have the same beliefs. So when we get ready to make these lists of directors that will be selected for a project, and the list has, the men and the women on it, ask yourself, do I look at the name of that woman and immediately second guess her and wonder if she's capable? It could be a microsecond. There's research that shows us that our unconscious bias is just that, unconscious. It kicks in before we even know it. Are we looking at her and immediately questioning her? Or do you look at that name and say, capable? Is that your immediate response? And what I find to be a really insidious quality in these selections is that women have to prove themselves more. So I was sitting on this panel with Angela Robinson, who's a filmmaker, and she's fantastic. So she made this great short, then she did the Herbie the Love Bug movie, then she was a writer on Hung, on HBO, blah, blah, blah. And she was talking about one of her next opportunities and saying that in her meeting, they said, well, yeah, we'll take a chance on you. And I laughed on the panel because I thought, take a chance? Like the woman has executive produced, 2 seasons of television on HBO.
Where's the
She's directed a
chance?
film. She directed a short. Where's the chance?
Well, because she's a woman, she could still just fall apart.
Exactly. So I think even well-meaning people, because clearly this person is giving her the job that she had, but even in that, they're saying, we'll take a chance. What's the chance? She sounds qualified to me. So I feel like we have to really look at that. That's definitely a big part of it. And all of us who sit in these chairs, like exec chairs and producer chairs, whatever the decision chairs are, look at, like, are you assuming women will fall apart?
Right. And this leads me to, I went to a panel where I was listening to a lot of the people who are doing the diversity programs at studios. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, they've put together a diversity program. They're going to bring people in to direct TV shows. On the other hand, they still see it as so risky, and they have all this scaffolding, and a white guy has to guarantee the episode, and there's so much hand-wringing around it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sit well with me.
No, because we're not facing the truth. Mm-mm. No, like even calling it risky. You're not facing the truth. Look at the facts. Is it a risk?
No.
Look at the numbers. Is it really a risk? If the people have credits and credibility, where's the risk? The risk is in you changing your perception.
Right.
That's the risk. It's kind of like saying minorities. Are we really minorities? If we're 51%, who's the minority? Right? If women are 51, who's the minority? That's math. Are people of color really minorities when it comes to being two white people in this country? We're not minorities.
Right.
And it's important to, to kind of look at that. So the risk is in letting go of your long-held beliefs. And science shows holding on to beliefs is a part of identity. If you ask people to change their beliefs, you're asking them to change who they fundamentally are. And that's difficult.
I feel like we're holding so tight to identity right now.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is because people aren't represented and not included, so you have to hold on to the identity. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that just came up for me when you said that is I feel like the word minority is one that needs to change now.
That's what I mean
when
I say that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a misnomer.
Right, and it puts a context that's just not true.
That's not true.
We should stop using that word.
No question.
What should we replace it with?
Well, I think in conversations when you're talking about people who are underrepresented, because that doesn't say that there's less of them, it just shows you that they're not represented on the screen. Right. That's what that means, underrepresented, as opposed to saying minority. They're underrepresented. African American, Latino, Native American, Asian Pacific Islander, if they were represented in the numbers in which they show up in the world, our programming would be vastly different, as would our behind-the-scenes crews.
Yeah. Everything would look like Grey's Anatomy.
Mm-hmm. It would. It definitely would. It would look like Grey's Anatomy. It would look like This Is Us. It would look like, what's the movie where it came out this summer and it was such a big deal? Will Smith is in it, based on the comic book.
Oh, you'll ask me a comic book.
Yes, yeah, but that one. It would look like that, where there was just this representation of so many of us in the film.
Yeah. Tell me this. Are you a success?
Yes, in the way that I define success.
How do you define it?
For sure. Because it's about emotional stability, sense of contentment, feeling like you make a contribution to the world, and having a sense of balance, that your life doesn't look like just one of your buckets. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's successful.
Are you a badass?
I do use that term. It's more an alter ego thing. I feel like I embrace it when you need to. You kind of need to kick it in high gear sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you ask yourself, if I thought I was a badass, how would I do this? I use it sparingly though. Because I feel like we're in a business where you do need, you need a lot of ego to get you going sometimes, to believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. Because if you really look at how film and television is made, it's a miracle. So you need a little bit of ego to get you to believe in your own miracle. And then I try to measure it though, because ego unchecked can be very dangerous.
You can't be all badass all the time.
Yeah, you just can't be all badass. Sometimes you just have to really, or actually maybe it's redefining badass. Maybe the badass means that you are able to be effective and also caring and concerned and considerate about others. So effective is only one part of being a badass.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Do you ever feel like an imposter?
I think that part of, to me, the artistic makeup is a little bit of antennas out towards the world. Particularly now, if your antennas are turned out to the world, you're going to be in some turmoil.
No, it's painful.
It's painful. Mm-hmm. You're going to just wake up and read and feel and intuit different things, and you'll feel a little bit messy. But you have to get showered, brush your eyebrows, and come on in looking not messy. but inside you feel a little messy. I think inside for me right now, I'm really struggling with the ways in which people are harming other people, on a government level. I'm struggling with it. It just bothers me that people don't believe in equal pay, that it's just not a concept, that if a woman walks into an office and a man walks in, that they're not paid the same thing. I don't get it. I also do not get Flint, Michigan, and the water.
Still.
I do not get how you could willingly poison a group of people and then cover it up. And then the people who are involved in whistleblowing end up dead. Like, that is just mind-boggling. So I think if I'm aware when I get up of all those things, I take them with me. And yet, you walk into your 11 a.m. meeting, you have to talk about production, and you put it together, and you talk about it.
You keep on keeping on.
And you keep on keeping on, and you go back home, and you're like, oh my gosh. Flint, Michigan, so many things. Your mind starts to go through so many things.
It's so much and so overwhelming right now. And it's like you have to watch every single day so you don't miss anything. But sometimes you need to take a day off.
Take a day off. What I think we can't take a day off from is jumping into the positive. And not positive like feel good positive. I love a good pet video like anybody else. And that's important. A pet video can lift your spirits. You need that goodness. But what I mean by positive is that the work. I think when your head goes on the pillow, you recognize that I did my part today. It can help you feel better. And
there are a lot of people doing their part.
That's right. And then you recognize I did my part, and there are millions of others of us today who did our part. Maxine Waters did her part. She was probably
she did.
On the floor of Congress standing up to them. Elizabeth Warren is doing her part.
Every day.
So
you don't have to do the whole thing yourself. You just have to do your part.
You do not have to do, yes, do your part. Do your part. So,
but you have to do your part.
Yeah. What I feel like is I'm really emotionally affected by what's happening right now, and you have to put it in the back of your mind to keep going. So that's not an imposter. I don't know what word you would use for that. You spend kind of 8 to 10 hours in a little bit of denial just because in that moment you can't work on it. So it's like, I don't want to dwell on it. I want to put it in the back burner.
So you have to tuck it away in order to do your part.
Yes, you have to tuck it away.
Because you have to keep moving forward. It feels to me like we are in a moment where we're really being asked to choose how we're going to go forward. And it's really scary because it seems like there's a lot of forces in choosing this batshit crazy direction. I don't think they're going to win, though.
Well, you can't think it, because if you think it, what will you do?
Then
Just like hiding your bunker, right? I think I have to believe that it's going to get better for people. I have to believe in a world where people will look at people who are different from them and not see that as a threat. Just recognize that they're different. Nobody walks by a garden and goes, oh my God, stupid hydrangeas. I can't stand those. They're so ugly. All I want are birds of paradise. Get rid of all the hydrangeas. They're bad. Who does that? But yet we do that with human beings. We classify each other and go, oh, brown, bad. White, bad. And it's like, come on.
It's crazy.
Come on. Can we just make a garden?
Yeah.
And I feel then people call you a, liberal, crazy hippie, and it's like, excuse me, what is crazy about trying to figure out a way to respect other human beings and their cultural backgrounds? How can I be made to feel shame for that?
And we live in a place where there are a lot of places where it works.
Yeah.
And we see that it does.
Yeah, where are they? Tell me where I can see them.
My kids' charter school is super diverse, and those kids do not have an issue. They're there. They're where we think we want to be.
I think it's just important to envision that. I need to envision a world where trans people are not, particularly trans women of color, are not just routinely executed in the streets. And then even when they're not being physically exterminated, people who are seemingly progressive are saying, oh, I don't think that they should be called women, or they shouldn't be called men, or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, says who? Says you? Like, they shouldn't be called that. Just because you don't.
Just because you can't get your head around something.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you get to persecute people.
Doesn't mean you get to persecute people. It doesn't mean you then get to deny them employment and housing and access to health care because you do not understand them. I mean, on a microcosm, a lot of people don't get along with their parents. So then what?
You gotta pass some laws.
You're gonna say she can't eat? My mother gets on my nerves. She can't have any cake. That's just not how it goes. You don't have to individually understand a person to protect their right to be.
Yeah.
And their right to be doesn't threaten your right to be. And I think that's the game people are trying to play. We're living in like this fear-mongering where, on either side, in many cases, I have to say, a lot of the headlines are just like, fear-mongering, watch it, boogeyman's on every corner. But in cases of groups who are trying to say to parents, oh, be very afraid that trans people will be in the bathroom with your children. If you look at the stats about who is harming your children, they're not in your park bathroom doing that. You know, if 1 out of 3 women is sexually assaulted in their lifetime, and a lot of them before the age of 16, that's happening in their homes. That's what the stats say. It's happening in their homes.
But are we going to address that?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, no.
Let's talk about in our culture how, you know, young girls by the time they're 16, a lot of them have already been assaulted by someone close to them. But you passing bills about trans people in bathrooms? Really? And not talking about the people right in their own homes? It just feels a little bit hypocritical, and I just got to believe in a world where we're going to calm down about it. It is new for a lot of people. This is to be expected when it's new, but are we on our way to settling down from the looks of it today? No, but hopefully we can.
It's going to take a minute. It's going to take a minute. And you see how far the gay movement has come in the last 10 years. And that was fast. From I don't know what to gay marriage is legal everywhere. That was a sprint. And we all got there. And it feels like now we're taking another breath before the next and the next.
The next leap forward.
Yeah.
May that be. Just what you said. May that be.
It has to. As long as you have people.
Yeah, I take hope in the 47% of people, I guess, who didn't vote in our national election. And you realize that somewhere 47% of the people didn't express their opinion. Or maybe they expressed it by not voting. But I just keep thinking that 47%, if we can continue to encourage people to think along the lines of equality and progress, that we'll continue to move in that direction. Those are just the things that are fundamental to me, and they're not political. People say it like it's political. It's not political. Equal pay is not a political thing. If women are heading up households but yet can't get the same amount of money, you're literally, as people say, taking food out of a child's mouth by not giving them equal pay. By not setting a minimum wage that allows people to live, you are creating permanent underclasses who will then kind of always live on the fringes of society. And the business school person in me, I think of it like this. We're a capitalist country. We are run on the consumption of goods and services. How much more could people consume if they had a proper income? Give them the means to have a proper income. So if you have, CEOs taking home $65 million bonuses per year and your workers are being paid $15 an hour on a 40-hour work week. Or not even.
And have to work 4 jobs to make their rent.
Yeah, who's living on $600 a week? But we're asking people to do it all the time. When your average housing costs in cities like Los Angeles are $2,000.
Yeah, and then shaming them when they can't.
And then shaming them when they can't. There's something highly wrong with that.
There's something corrupt somewhere.
Yeah, it's like just give people a chance. People of every background and experience a chance.
Where do you think storytelling fits into that?
Storytelling is your laser to understanding people. So every time you watch a story, hear a story in short or long form, Moth Stories on NPR, or your local storytelling events in cities, to your Oscar-nominated movies, to the great ads that are coming out now, the commercials, to television. It's all making you identify with other people. And if you begin to identify with people, then you stop othering them. And I think othering is the human crisis. I think that's the impact of storytelling. It helps you to stop othering people. That person is like me in many ways. They may be different in X, Y, and Z, but they're like me in all the other alphabet letters. So
what's the problem? Yeah. How brilliant was it that Moonlight won Best Picture?
Yeah, I was thinking of that too. It's a movie that's just been close to me from the moment I heard about it. I didn't get to see it in Toronto, and here in LA I took a group of friends and who were of different backgrounds, like a few straight men, and they were just all like, wow, that kid, what he had to go through, and people related to him, then as a result, you had a different relationship to masculinity, to drug addiction, to parenting, to poverty, to bullying. That film
to the
just
guy
hits
who you
you.
see, who you may call a thug, and maybe you'll think a minute now.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I walked in with a love for that guy, but what I walked out of with is realizing how many levels that film played on that allowed people to access all that. It was just fantastic. And people say, oh, it was just one of those, it was like a word of significance. They had to give it to Moonlight because of Oscar So White. And you're thinking, what film were you watching?
No, it earned it.
Were you watching the film that was made for $1.5 million and all the value that was on that screen? All the night shooting. Let's just talk about the practicalities of night shooting. Clearly you don't really know production if you don't see that they put a lot of value on that screen.
Yeah.
And Naomi Harris does that role in 3 days. Please. It was a feat. Even working with kids, the first scenes are 4 kids. Do you know what that means? That means they can only have a work day that was 6 hours long.
Yeah.
So they had to get all of that out of half the work day. That's why the film wins.
Just
you
the
want to
production
keep breaking
value
it down.
alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
From production value alone, we'll keep breaking it down. I think that's why it wins. Not to mention that last frame in the diner. People are going to be studying that last frame in much the way that, like, you study the scene between Robert De Niro and Pacino in Heat. You study the Raging Bull, the breakfast scene. Same way. They're going to be studying that scene.
It's great. What advice do you have for young women just starting out?
I think my best advice is find a place where you belong that gives you a sense of wholeness and where you can be all yourself. That may or may not be within your circle of people in this business, but find that place of belonging. It's not a touchy-feely response. That's real. This business is tough. And belonging, according to Maslow's hierarchy, right, is a human need. And it makes you feel fortified, and it encourages you to be resilient. It gives you a soft place to land, and you will need all of that in this business at any stage.
You need to be able to be yourself.
Yes, you need to be able to be yourself. So just search for the place you belong, and you'll come back to it. Not just in your bad times, but in your good times. When you finish the awards ceremony, I'm sure all these people on those stages can attest. When you finish, you want to come back to the people who really, really care for you. And they're really happy about that award you have. They've watched you. They love you whether you get an award or not. So it's even sweeter when they see you prospering. So that would be my biggest advice, is just to have that sense of belonging. And then, separately looking at some of the hard practical stuff, it is strive for excellence. Continue to grow. Continue in knowledge and wisdom. Be careful to search for it. Look for inspiration in art that's not your particular medium. So if you're a television or film person, look for inspiration in painting and sculpture and architecture and design, because it will all feed, every other area.
Is there anything you haven't accomplished yet that you want to accomplish?
Please, please. There is so much more ahead in this journey for me. Oh my God. No, I'm in no way done,
Like what?
Do you know that Lucille Ball story that it was I don't know if it's quite mythology at this point, but the 2 days she was in the hospital before she passed, and on one of the days or something like that, she looked at her calendar and she was like, oh, I was supposed to get my hair done. And you realize, like, you're just always planning. So I feel like that. Like, there's plenty to do. I haven't directed I want to direct a feature and multiples. And my quest is really to just tell these complex stories, primarily about people of color. And that's because it's important to me for us to be represented. And like you said, we're not minorities. The majority of us are people of color. I just want to see it told beautifully and 3-dimensionally. And what is a bonus right now is that I think in the early 90s when I had this quest, you felt like you would be almost like a lonely only. You would be out there making the films on your own. And now you have this fantastic community of filmmakers from Southeast Asia, from the Middle East, from Kenya, from Nigeria, from the States, from Latin America. They're just all over making these fantastic films. That's in addition to the African American community here, the queer community here. There are all these marginalized communities that are making great art. So I feel like I will get to make it in this time.
Yeah.
And that feels fantastic.
It's exciting. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you wanted to say?
I can't imagine it, girl. I'm tired. That was like a lot of talking.
Okay,
I'm done.
Thank you so much for
You're
doing
very
this.
welcome. Thank you for having this conversation.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, A History of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Taj Paxton for telling her story. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And of course, on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features, bios of our guests, pictures, the blog, the merchandise. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at Other50%. Instagram at Other50% Podcast. And don't forget to check out The Other 50%, A History of Tech. Those conversations are pretty good too. Thanks for listening. See you next time.